But we have Mo Barnhart, mother of Dahlia. Now, we know that Dahlia and her mother moved to Colorado a while back. They have since moved back to Florida, but they had moved there to seek cannabis treatment in this. I guess it's, you could say it's an occurrence or a phenomenon that you would call cannabis refugees, where people are in a state where they can't get it. Like, I'm in Texas, so I'm sure there's plenty of people who leave Texas to get their medicine because there's no medical system down here, and it's just very, even like if you're getting on the black market, it costs twice as much down here too. It's just really constricting. It's very difficult. So I can understand the forces behind it. So that's why we had her on before, and I just wanted to get her back on to do a little update and see kind of where everything's going, how everybody's doing. Nice to have you back on. How are you doing?
Well, we're home, so that's been nice. We've been home since last year. Yeah, I completely agree with the title, medical refugee. It definitely feels like that's exactly what you are. You're in the United States, but from one zip code to the next, your restrictions and the laws change.
Yeah.
We're told all the time you shouldn't have to move. And the truth is if I was the one who was sick, or if I had a child who was over 18, it would be a much different story. But even in legal states, we know that DCF, aka CPS, has been really a nightmare for parents. So we figured Colorado seemed to be the most parental-friendly state at the time. This was in 2013 and 2014, and unfortunately, it was also very expensive. It was expensive to pick up and move. We lost everything when my daughter was diagnosed as a single mother. I think that that's pretty common in any critical or chronic illness diagnosis of a young child. We were obviously alone. We were in a state where we didn't know anyone. And the amount that the medicine would have cost had we not had donations from just friends like Phoenix Tears was really an insurmountable voyage. And that's something that I saw a lot of other parents were facing. But while CNN is airing, medicinal benefits and or the smiling faces of children who maybe are benefiting, it's really important for us to get the message out that this is a really life-altering situation to be put in when your child's diagnosed, and it really rips the rest of your life apart to have to pick up and move to be away from your family, your support group, your closest friends, everybody who at home provides you the comfort and the support system that you really need to get through those trying times, which is why we did fight so hard. We, had lawyers in Florida fighting for us to come home, and we felt pretty safe in doing so. Unfortunately, our access has been limited, and we've gone without at different periods of time. There are some scientists who kind of believed that being on cannabis for extended period of time can be like antibiotics. And in that they wouldn't suggest that you were on it for an extended period of time. So while it made the decision a little easier that we didn't have consistent access in Florida, because obviously where are you going to get your medicine from in an illegal state? You have to get it from somewhere else. And that means that you're not going to have a consistent supply. So Dahlia has really been on and off and recently had new growth. So at 16 months, where we were really ready to celebrate a cancer-free new beginning, they did find new growth. So she's back on chemotherapy as of Tuesday. It's very disappointing. It's very depressing. And obviously, I'm working very diligently to make sure that our supply, even in this state, is consistent for her from this point forward.
Yeah.
But it is difficult. It's difficult because, like I said earlier, if it was for an adult, I would have no problem getting medicine from anywhere and not having it tested. But I'm dealing with an immunocompromised young child who is extremely ill and on very harsh medications when they're on treatment. And you really have no option in that. So the ignorant statements about I would never travel that path or my child would never have chemotherapy. No, your child would, because the state would take custody of them and they would give it to them and you would be in jail. That's what would happen. So, you really don't have a choice in the conventional treatments. But as for the supplemental, I think that we're opening a lot of doors to ensure that parents across the nation and eventually around the globe do have the option, first and foremost, to choose cannabis as a very effective and compassionate option for their child. And then once we have those things in place and established, we're really, intending to work on DCF and CPS education and policy changes, as well as forced conventional treatments when the prognosis.
It has
exactly.
To be, yeah.
That's what Canna Moms is about. I mean, I think that we, as the parents who have been in these situations, understand it better than anyone else. So while you do get a lot of ignorant comments from people who do not have any idea what you're going through, much less the rules and laws that kind of force you to make certain decisions, but, the parents across the nation coming together and helping, the movement and the mission of Canna Moms really do have a deep, intimate understanding of what these children are going through and what that design is.
Yeah, and that's the thing. People need to step back and kind of listen, and listen to that experience, and take that and just move that around and make that conversation something that people who are kind of early in that journey. Make it so something that's available to them, so that they can learn through others.
It should never have to be a last resort, right? Like when you're backed into a corner and your child is literally dying and just writhing in pain, all of a sudden it becomes clear to you that you will break bad laws to save their life. But up until that point, all of that needless suffering is what we hope to eradicate. We want parents to never, ever say, I wish I had known, or I wish I had known how to access it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the supply and access, that's going to definitely rely on changing the laws, being active in your local governments, and submitting legislation, drawing up legislation, and
absolutely. People wonder why we spend a lot of time in politics, and the truth of the matter is, I fully endorse breaking bad laws today to save a life. That's
right.
Just common sense, and I don't want to be associated with anyone who says that they wouldn't break a law to save a life, right? Or even to stop the suffering. But at the same time, I don't want a parent in 5 years to be deemed a criminal and risk losing their child to DCS intervention and to be at risk of going to prison. So it's like you said, it's by design. I mean, there's all these different aspects to this. We want to save children today. We want to stop suffering today, but we also want to ensure that that path is much easier and, one that doesn't involve becoming a criminal for parents down the road.
Yeah. Well, and we saw what was pretty disappointing, last election cycle in Florida. And, of course, a lot of people don't understand how it was approached exactly. It was a constitutional amendment that they were trying to put in. And, of course, it had to garner over 60%, well over 60% of the vote, and it fell just short. So cannabis wasn't in fact legalized in Florida. But with it being so close, it makes me feel like the outlook is pretty good for Florida. Because like with
you had a lot of people, hysterical when that vote came in, and a lot of people were very upset. And all of my media afterwards kind of shocked and even upset some people because I was very pleased with the outcome. So you have like three ways that you can really go about this: through loopholes in statutes and current policy, through the courts, things of that nature, which is just unlikely and no one has time for it. Legislature, who has let us down time and time again and intends to do so again this year, is my stance on that, and a constitutional amendment. Well, no one wants to see something like this written into the Constitution. It's just silly. Unfortunately, because the other options are not viable and because legislature is not stepping up to the plate, we have no option but to support constitutional amendments. And unfortunately, prior years, Florida had agreed that you would have to have a 60% vote to change anything in the Constitution. So whereas 50%, anything higher than 50% most of the time in Florida, it's 60%. But when 58% of people in a state that's in a current Republican supermajority say that they are acknowledging and understand cannabis as medicine, when really the parents had only been on board for a year and a half prior, really doing some strong media, and we were getting them out of the woodworks. To be honest, a lot of them were subjected to DCF investigations just for their advocacy. It was a very, very cruel year prior to that vote. But to know that 58% of people in a state like Florida acknowledged our need and were willing to vote to put this into the Constitution was immense to me. It meant so much, because there are people who, you know, really believe cannabis is medicine and want it, but they either didn't want to see it in the Constitution or didn't agree with the verbiage of that specific medical amendment.
Yeah.
So the fact that 58% of people were willing to vote yes meant a lot. That meant upwards of over 80% of Floridians would vote yes on cannabis being medicine. Maybe had it been written differently, or had they felt more comfortable with understanding, you know, how the policy would be put into place afterwards or whatever. So this year, our job is to take it even further. We've got 2 medical amendments and 2, you know, one quote unquote recreational, one quote unquote regulated, and one that just reschedules cannabis as a supplement, or deschedules it and defines it as a supplement. So obviously we've only got one amendment that's made the 70,000 signature landmark to get it to Supreme Court review yet, and that's the same amendment that got 58% of the vote last year. So we are pretty confident that that amendment has been made much more strict in its verbiage in order to garner more votes this next year. So that one will probably fly through, but because it is so restrictive, we definitely need to get the word out that we need one of the other amendments to pass. Like, if we want to grow at our own home, we need the regulated amendment to pass, the Regulate Florida amendment, or the quote unquote recreational amendment. And we don't care about all these people you say are going to be doing whatever you think they're going to do with it, because, honey, they're already doing it. Any adult who wants to access cannabis already has. They already have it in their home. They have somebody who sells it to them. It's on a black market. And we know that the war on drugs is killing our children. It's doing nothing less. So it's time to end it. And all of this huge scare about all these people that are going to be getting their hands on it is just silly. You really think that a kid who's getting some kind of recreational psychoactive substance from someone is suddenly going to go, oh, well, if I get a fake ID, I can go into this, you know what I mean? Go into this place where there's lights and cameras and purchase it there. It's not going to happen. It's silly.
Yeah. Hang on one second. Everything all right? I was hearing a noise, weird noise over there. Well, you know, the thing is, like, it's like down here in Texas, I complain because it's super expensive, and I think, like, you know, that's one of the things. Like you were talking about this, you're scrutinous about the medicine that you would have your daughter consume. And when you're in a situation where you kind of have to go black market, you know, I think that exacerbates that situation. And but even in states where they have medical cannabis, I hear legends about dispensaries that don't even have strains listed. They don't have strain names.
Absolutely.
Just like, here, it's cannabis. Take it. There you go. It's like, oh, you serious? You can't be serious. And then, of course, patients hear a lot of stories about patients in states that have a system set up getting sick. So then you think about, you know, going black market. Or if I was out here in Texas and I needed, you know, some strain specific relief, what am I to do? You know, there's no way. I mean, it's either, I was joking last week about it's either good weed or bad weed. Those are the two strains in Texas: good weed and bad weed.
Right. Exactly.
It's a nightmare-scape for somebody who needs strain-specific treatment.
Well, and even the medical amendment in this state, as strict as it is for patients, it's not strict enough for medical. So it doesn't say that in order to sell something as medicine, it can't have pesticides. I mean, that's a pretty simple and obvious stipulation to something being medicinal, right? So we're going to have to be careful, and I really believe that the patients and the caregivers are the ones who are going to know and understand what policies need to be put into place in order to really ensure the safety and well-being of those patients. And I mean, it's a matter of freedom for a lot of people. We don't want our government telling us what's right and wrong. We don't trust the government in any other aspect of our life. But then all of a sudden it tells you that the devil's going to rise from the earth if you legalize this specific plant that's been all over the earth for thousands and thousands of years being used as medicine. And all of a sudden people jump on a bandwagon. And I think that veil is starting to come off, and they're going, well, I don't trust the government when it comes to my taxes, and I don't trust the government when it comes to wars overseas, and I don't trust the government at all. Why would I trust them on this? I don't. Let's end the war on drugs.
You know, my hope is that they set up a way, for quality's sake and for the sake of the patients, to regulate and manage the just have some real standards for quality control. But at the same time, I have one specific message for policymakers, and that is, don't you dare tell us that we can't grow it. Don't you dare tell patients they can't grow this, or people, or in communities,
anyone.
Communities where you need a food source. This is a tremendous an amazing food source. Don't tell anybody they can't grow it. It's insane.
Yeah, so we're actually also reintroducing the hemp bill this year. Senator Clemens is doing that in the Senate. So, I mean, I'm all for hemp.
Yeah.
First and foremost, that's just the most ridiculous of all of this, is that hemp has ever been illegal. It's the most blatantly obvious that it's big business, and that we're importing it legally. So we're paying all these other countries to grow it. That's got to stop. So we need hemp. We need that bill to pass. And then we need, one of the amendments that states that it is our constitutional right to grow it in our own yard. And then, the medical, we're going to need policies that do ensure the well-being of the patient, the efficacy and the safety of the medicine. So we've got really three hard fights that we're fighting this year, but I do think that we've garnered enough media. We've captured enough of our neighbors' attention. We've explained it in a manner where people can really, truly understand, as if this was their own child, or this was their own loved one, or this is their own body. And they really understand that even medical aside, the whole thing is ridiculous, and we don't have more tax money for prisons. We are not spending any of our tax money on our children's education, on public schools, but we are spending it all on prisons, and it's got to stop. I think everybody can agree on that. It doesn't matter if they're black, white, Democrat, Republican, Christian, atheist. There is enough common sense in the messages that we have that everybody should be able to agree that those three things, between hemp, home grows, and medical, there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't have that by the end of 2016.
Yeah, and the restrictions on caregivers too, because I've heard about certain systems where caregivers are so limited how many patients they can provide for, that the freedom. I just don't like the restrictions. I like the idea how in Colorado, for instance, they don't have to pay the taxes that recreational buyers have to pay. That's one thing that I kind of like. But I think, when you're hindering the process of them getting their medicine, it's outrageous, and that's why prohibition altogether is extremely outrageous. It's one of the most abusive practices we've ever done, because the main effect, the main importance, or the main impact this plant makes is for people who, growing up and for a long time, I've never been able to afford insurance. I hadn't had health insurance for a very long time. And of course, I've been in situations where I just would tough stuff out because I didn't want to go to the doctor, couldn't afford to go to the doctor. I know I've talked about this on the show a couple times. There were a couple times when I was in Spain, and I got sick and I didn't want to go to a Spanish doctor. So I used cannabis to bail me out of having to go to the doctor. And it's like, that it's a good resource for people who don't have a lot of money or don't have a lot of stuff to work with.
Well, and like with all of our freedoms, we're creating a blueprint here in Florida. We started with decriminalization. District by district, it's falling like dominoes. So we're decriminalizing around the state. Then we're going after legislation, amendments. We're creating a blueprint. We do intend to take this federal. This is, by and large, a federal issue, as we know. Even in legal states, you're having raids. They are coming through the courts down hard on federal continuing to impede on state laws. So that's a great next step. And as was already stated, it's by design. This is definitely something that has a lot of facets to it, and we need to address them all. But like with all things to do with our freedoms, it's a never-ending fight. So once we have all this in place and we go state by state and we go after federal, they are going to continue just like in Colorado. When I was in Colorado, I had just moved there with my daughter who was, on chemotherapy for brain cancer, thinking I had just come to my oasis. And they were trying to implement rules where you could have your child taken from you just for having cannabis in your home, much less to give it to the child. So, I was having to attend hearings with politicians immediately upon my arrival there to get that knocked out. And, still in Colorado, you have them trying to impede on the amount that caregivers can grow for the amount of patients they can take care of. So the fight is going to be never ending until this is just done, until prohibition is behind us and it's over and we can move on to things. There's so many important things that we need to do in this country. And we have spent way too many trillions of dollars on the war on drugs. We've got to end it and put it behind us, because by the time I leave this earth, I want to leave it a much better place for my children and for children around the globe and for grandchildren and future generations, as do, all people in my situation and or yours, where we're just working to make the world better. And it's really just one of those things where you sometimes wake up in the morning rolling your eyes going, oh, is this fight still here? This is just so silly. And you just wish it was already behind you. But we've got to keep knocking these walls down till we just end prohibition, leave the war on drugs behind us, and move on to some of the other issues that really need to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of the most embarrassing things, I'm outraged about I'm outraged about certain things, and then some things kind of are just so out there and just crazy that it's embarrassing to me just to be a person, to be a human being, to be part of the human species. When I look at some of the stuff that we do, we have such advanced technology. We come up with amazing art and stuff like that, but then at the same time, we have starvation across the globe.
That's what I just said the other day. I said, the fact that we can go and fly through outer space, but we're giving children cancer-causing drugs that damage their organs and kill them in order to eradicate a tumor is beyond me. And it's because our priorities are not straight, and they need people to straighten them out. And that's where you and I and anyone else listening, or anyone else, of similar regard, come in. Because the truth is if you feel like you don't fit in here, you were born into a world that doesn't belong to you. It's because you were born here to change it. And that is our job. And we've gone generations where there's a lot of lazy people and people like to sit and watch the TV and talk about politics, but they don't look up who they're voting for in the voting history. They just vote for a D or an R. We just need to move past all of this, and we really need everyone to start rising up, putting their money where their mouths are, start acting instead of talking, and really getting to work. And that's the bottom line, is if we're all working, these things are going to come to fruition, and they're going to come to fruition in the next decade. And I can see this country in 15 years being a much different place. Prohibition and the war on drugs must be left behind us in order for us to make strides in any other area, because it's one of the greatest injustices. It's clogging our systems and wasting our tax dollars. We're putting money into prisons instead of schools. We cannot educate our children correctly because we are so focused on law enforcement. And it's, to the degree that it's a police state, not a protect and serve state. And, there's so much to do with the war on drugs that has to be our first priority, is to eradicate that and then move on to these other issues. Because even when you're talking about starvation, how much do the war on drugs and homelessness and starvation, particularly in this country, but other countries who have used blueprints from the Western world, have to do with each other? Because they all go hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's one of our exports. Prohibition is a horrible export. And I've talked to people from other countries, and they express that to me. They're like, "Hey, man, you Americans kind of screwed it up for everybody."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well,
Agreed.
and it lights a little fire for me to get out there and do everything I can to set the record straight and get the veil of prohibition lifted, because it's happening already. Global legalization has begun, but it needs to happen faster because patients are waiting for medicine.
Well, yeah, Croatia just legalized. We've got Brazil, it's coming down hard. You have a lot of actually moms, just like Canna Moms in Chile, Brazil, other countries. We started Mothers of the World because we've seen in so many countries, just like they took prohibition and ran with it, they've taken a lot of what we've done and run with it. So that, first initial media garnering that the parents and the kids got, a lot of other countries aired the same and actually translated stuff, showed it to their politicians. And, as much as we can take from other countries and they take from us, I do think that we're starting to see a worldwide community because we have social media. We've got shows like this. We've got all sorts of avenues for everyone to communicate with each other, to translate emails, to translate social media correspondences. And I do think that this is definitely a worldwide effort. Only one person has to start with a small step. So we all start in our own backyard. And for me, that was Florida. I see the dominoes falling here. And, like I said, we fully intend to give this blueprint out when we start chapters coming up before the end of the year. We'll be helping everyone in every state, but we're going to go fast and hard after federal. We've already seen federal start to crumble. We've seen some really, really big names. Even there's something in the media just new today. And every single day there's something new in the media about some really high-ranking politicians, military personnel, law enforcement coming out and saying, we absolutely cannot continue to, say, for instance, put our law enforcement officers' lives at risk every single day over a plant. We won't stand for it, and we can no longer do it. So things like that are just very, very important to keep in mind, that all of our efforts are not in vain. We are seeing it start to come to fruition, and we've just got to keep strong at it for another few years. And like I said, the fight's going to be longer than that, but it won't be as hard. If we can just get things to start to fall into place, then it's like, okay, in your district, they're trying to take away, the number of patients you can have as a caregiver. Sure, you've got to stay on top of that, stay with your politicians, do some advocacy work, get everyone to be aware, do some media, but it's not going to be like what it is today where you're just completely backed into a corner and starting from scratch.
Exactly. Well, people need to be active. People need to get out there and vote. Don't be lazy. Think about, it could be your neighbor who could use the relief, who's suffering, and this needs to be available as a first line of defense for people, especially like who were in a situation that I was in, where I didn't really have money. I was in a good spot. I did not want to go to a doctor. I could not go to a doctor, basically, and I was able to heal myself from things that could have really gone far south. And we've actually come up on our halfway point to our show here, so we're going to switch gears, hit a commercial break, and we're going to have Jesse Lopez with the Plant Channel bouncing on to go over some news and some happenings over there with us. Mo, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. We need to have you back on really soon because I'm going to be doing a lot of work in activism, coming up and working down there in Haiti and stuff, and just
awesome.
a little. I'm shifting gears a little bit because I've been in in the marketing and entertainment aspect of the cannabis industry, and I really want to kind of reconnect with my activist roots. I got into it originally promoting Rick Simpson's work and getting him to come on our shows and answer questions, and I really want to go back to the tradition of working with people like you and him who are out there and very active. And like you mentioned, in Croatia it got legalized. He's out there ground zero, and I just want to get out there and work with him also. And we need to have you on with him and do a panel, because we'll have Rick on with Dina every once in a while, and he's coming on with another guest in a couple weeks from Kip Baldwin from Just Love Radio, and Rick are going to do a panel also. So we need to get you on with Rick also coming up here pretty soon. I really appreciate you coming on. Did you want to direct anybody to Canna Moms? I mean, y'all have a Facebook page,
sure,
and a website set up and everything.
Yeah, so our Facebook page is Canna Moms, and our website is www.cannamoms.com. First, we started this for our children, but we certainly fight for and beside every patient of every age and every ailment. We are for federal full end of prohibition and war on drugs. We always appreciate your work, your support, your advocacy, and anyone who needs anything from us or feels that they have anything to give to the movement, we're always willing to take your messages, take your information, and try to help in any way we can.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm going to share a link across some of our pages tonight to Can Moms. That way everybody listening can connect with them and just see what they're up to. All right, thank you very much. You have a nice night. We'll have you on back again really soon, and we will be back with Blunted Radio here after a short break, so stay in your seat.